that is the part of this backcourt that I'm fascinated with, is in this maybe more egalitarian offensive system that Billy's going to try this season.
Shout out.
Can Zach find a spot that works for him? Because Zach, we know, can be an off-ball threat, a slasher, a catch-and-shoot threat from the corners, honestly, from anywhere. Kobe also has proven that he can be a good combo guard on the ball, off the ball. This past season, I think a lot of that growth was about what he could do breaking down defenses as a primary ball handler.
True.
But so now it's like there's an additional piece of this puzzle with Giddey coming in. And how are you talking about, who gets the most touches and who's bringing the ball up more often between Josh Giddey and Kobe White, and then also fitting Zach Lavine into that equation, and hopefully having a system offensively that allows you to display a useful version of Zach Lavine that that teams might actually start calling you about because they want him.
I think that is what's going to, more than just going out there and scoring 25 a night, I think that's going to be what convinces teams that they want to go out and get Zach, because
He'll be unselfish, you mean?
But yeah, exactly. By playing to a system and proving that he doesn't need to be the guy with the ball in his hands every time down, by proving that he's not a ball stopper. If he goes out and plays within a system and has success and scores the ball efficiently and contributes to like an offense that looks a little bit more cohesive, that moves a little bit better, that's going to convince teams that he is not this like perception that everybody has decided that's who he is. That's who he has been, because that's what's been asked of him, because the talent around him wasn't good. Yeah. And when the talent around you is not good, the best thing you can do in order to score is give the ball to your best player. That has been at times what happens with DeMar. That has been at times what happened with Zach. But the problem was that never led to enough success to where it was like, yeah, he's worth giving him the ball in his hands every time and giving him the amount of money that you're giving him. So now he has to come in and prove that he can be a really good off-ball player, a really good scorer, a really good catch and shoot guy, really good cutter, really good finisher, who can also give you some creation if you really need it. If you're in a situation where, you have two star players that are really good with the ball in their hands, you want to bring in a third guy so that when one of those guys is on the bench, you can always have two of them out there. And when all three of them are out there, Zach needs to prove, I can be that tertiary guy that can just be a fluid system scorer. And I think if he does that, it can work really well for him, and it can get him traded, which is what I think both parties want. So I think it's not necessarily just feed the ball to Zach and let him score as much as possible. I think it's like create a system that convinces other teams that Zach can play into a system, which is what you want to trade for in a guy, because nobody's trading for him to be the primary guy on a championship team.
Absolutely not. If he's third on your team, you're awesome.
Rob in the comments bring up a good question. Has there ever been a Bulls offensive coach to implement Zach running around in a Golden State-esque offense? Much the way you just see and have seen for a decade now, Steph and Klay just running around screens constantly off the ball. And I think that is something Billy Donovan should explore. It's not, we got to make Zach look like the better version of himself that people forgot exists so we can trade him. So just let Zach go hero ball. That's not going to help anybody. It's not going to help his trade value, in my opinion. I don't think, Rob, I don't think we've ever seen any Bulls offense when Zach Lavine's been here where a primary focus of that is getting Zach Lavine looks by getting him screens and finding ways to get him open off the ball. And I think we've always talked about how that could be a lethal version of Zach, and that we just don't see that much of it ever.
That's true. But I think it goes back to what you guys were saying. It was built around him to be the guy.
Right.
So it's a little hard. When you started seeing little bits of that is when DeMar got here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like when Lonzo was here. Then, and he can do all those kind of things. So,
Kobe's playmaking abilities that we saw take a substantial, a step forward this past season, a lot of that happened with Zach Lavine off the floor.
Correct.
Because he was hurt.
Correct.
Can Kobe and Zach develop some sort of chemistry where Kobe's increased playmaking abilities can benefit Zach if Zach's off the ball and Kobe's creating? Josh Giddey, we know the one thing he can do well is find teammates who are open. Yeah. So if you're talking about Giddey having the ball in his hands and finding opportunities and ways in which you're running off-ball screens for Zach Lavine to get him open, pin down screens, corner screens to get a catch-and-shoot opportunities, we know that that's something that Giddey can do. Maybe that chemistry can exist between Zach and Giddey, but again, it's about Zach embracing a much different role than he's been used to.
Yeah, and Giddey is passing, rebounding, then scoring.
Yeah.
That's his top three things that he does well. So that's, I don't know, it's so weird and interesting position because you're right. We've watched you drop 25, 5, and 5, and they know exactly what you can do as far as a scorer and all that, but they don't want that, clearly. You know what I mean? I'm not saying the contract has a huge part of it, for sure, but if they truly wanted that, a team's going to find a way to make that work, and they don't want that. So they want something else from you. Wherever he goes, if he's the number 3 guy on the team, that's an awesome, amazing team. I feel like if he goes to that kind of team where he's number 3, he will be able to create and do what he wants as far as just being a third option on the squad. But if he goes somewhere else and they ask you to be the 2, he's going to have to be more off ball. He's going to have to play into the system. So that's what I think teams are going to start looking at, because I immediately think of teams like the Lakers or something like that. Like, you think LeBron's going to let you be ball dominant, bro? Like, that ain't going to be the case. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have to find how you can do it without it being that. And that's going to be something huge going into this season. And I'm not putting it all on Billy Donovan's shoulders, but I'm just saying, since he's the head coach, he's got to come up with these plays, with these designs, you know, with his new team of assistant coaches who are kind of offensive-oriented coaches. He's going to have to put together some kind of scheme to benefit those guys, to get the best out of Zach, to get the best out of Giddey, and get the best out of Kobe, because coming in, that's your 3 right there. Sorry, Vooch.
I think, you know, you mentioned the Warriors, Matt, and I think, like, there's a reason why, you know, over the past 10 years, nobody's really been able to replicate that style of offense. It's what makes that work is not just that those guys can shoot the way that they do. It's their ability to move off the ball. Yeah, I mean, it's just they're one of one. But
move off the ball, yes. But just a real quick interjection, I feel like just a couple seasons ago, Zach Lavine was among the players near the top at like distance traveled on an NBA court when he played, you know, almost the entire season. Like, Zach Lavine is capable of doing that too.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with this, is that, like, I think there's a world where you, again, this is like loose, but it's like Giddey becomes kind of like the Draymond on offense. Obviously, he's not going to be the best defensive player in the world, but, like, can he be like the big wing for that kind of initiates the break, that runs the offense, while Zach and Kobe get up the floor and they run some screening actions between each other? Like, screener for screeners on with guys who can shoot is super dangerous. And I think when you put those guys in action together off ball with Giddey on the ball, it can kind of maximize all of their strengths at the same time. And I think that's kind of what they're going to have to try to build. It's just like, can you put all that together? Because it's a lot to ask those guys. And it's a very difficult system to try to implement, especially when you have guys who, you know, Zach and Kobe want the ball in their hands too. Yeah. So they really have to buy in. I think that's the buy-in and the motion, the movement, the selflessness, all of that is what made those Warriors teams special. But I think there are elements of that you can take to apply to what this Bulls core has. And maybe Lonzo is in there too, and he can help, you know, grease the wheels on offense. Maybe Vooch is, you know, playing a little bit through the top of the key, and he can run some of this stuff too. But, like, at the end of the day, if you want any of that to work, it's got to be because your shooters are willing to set screens and move and, like, constantly be relocating, and that's going to be on them just as much.
We all silly like the mayor.